You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan. Did you want to repeat that?
No.
Did I edit all your best stuff?
No, I don't need to. People that watch it regularly know that.
And we are here with Mr. Brett Newcomb,
Hi.
Ms. Michelle Stagg. How are you doing, Michelle?
Good, how are you?
It's good to have you here again.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. I thought you had something. No.
I just am happy to be here with two clinicians that I've trained and mentored through the years to be more like me.
Does it make you, you know what? I actually, and this is the first time I've ever thought this, how does it make you feel to be in a room with other individuals that you have trained and to know
Superior.
that they... Okay. Not exactly what I was looking for, but probably very honest. Yeah, probably very honest.
No, you know, one of the reasons that I've agreed to do this podcast, and we've done over the last couple of years, and we get close and ebb and flow towards meeting the goal, is to make the podcast address itself to people that are interested in doing therapy as clinicians, or in getting an understanding of what therapy is like without being in therapy from clinicians. And so we try to have conversations that address those issues. So I'm intrigued with the three of us talking because we've all had similar clinical training and similar clinical experiences, but we have different perspectives on how to do it in the room. And so I was hoping we could kind of talk about some of those differences. One of my arguments has always been that psychologists just rewrite the same articles and put different words on them and call it something new, so it sounds like something fresh is out there, but it's the same old stuff.
Right.
But fundamentally, I believe that to be a clinician, to do therapy, you have to have a mind map that helps you understand what you think is going on with people and where the pieces that are out of focus or that are broken might reside, and how to find them and help bring them into focus, help correct them. That's a clinical challenge.
Yeah.
And you have to do it with respect, you have to do it with passion, you have to do it with consummate attention. I used to, for 30 years, I taught at a university in a nighttime program from 5:30 to 9:30 at night. And I would regularly say to my students, because they'd be great at 5:30, 6, 6:30, 6:45. Then they start checking their watch or yawn in or check their emails and stuff. And I would say to them, this is what it's like to do therapy. You have to, this opportunity to learn how to discipline yourself, to be in the background and pay attention to what's going on, what people are bringing to you to consider. And they would look at each other like, what the hell is he talking about?
Yeah.
I hear
Not all
your
of them,
voice at
some of
least
them.
once a week. I swear to God, because on those days where you're tired, or, you know, I was telling you, I had an insane day with my kid, and I lived
And then you had
like
to go
4
to therapy.
days already, and then I had to go to therapy all of it. And I remember that, and I hear your voice saying, these people are paying you.
You're on the clock.
Right.
You are on the clock.
Yeah.
Their money is worth something, and you show up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you bring it.
You bring it.
You have to learn how.
Every time.
Put your stuff in a box and bring it.
Right.
You do.
Right.
At least I do passionately believe that.
I agree completely.
I always called that a theoretical orientation, that a person has to have a theoretical orientation, and if you don't have a theoretical orientation that you can define, then you don't have a theoretical orientation. And it isn't easy
I
enough.
always said I was eclectic.
Well, then people say eclectic, and so what eclectic means is that you have...
I don't have a theoretical orientation.
or you use different kinds of tools to be able to be effective in therapy. And it's fine to be eclectic as long as you can define it. But if you say I'm eclectic and you can't define it, then you don't.
Why
have
does
a
that feel
theory.
important to you, though?
Because what Brett was talking about, he uses the concept of mind map, and whether it's a mind map or however you think of it, if you don't have some idea of where you think that human pathology evolves from, then you don't have an idea of how human pathology evolves. And if you don't have an idea, then you're just shooting in the dark. And if you're getting paid to do it, I don't believe that that's how you should approach I think that you should have a very clear, like, I can use cognitive behavioral interventions, but my understanding of how human pathology evolves is through the Hines-Kohut theory of how emotional regulation develops through the concepts of idealization, twinship, and mirroring. And I can explain in great depth and detail what all of those things mean. So I would say that I am psychodynamic, very specifically object relations, and even more specifically Kohutian within that field of object relations. But I use other techniques as well, but I can define what that means for me. And you don't have to understand it that way.
Yeah.
But I have to understand it that way so that I have a frame of reference to approach when I'm working with a client.
But you don't need to explain that to the client.
Well,
I think
I know
that you're
I know.
getting off on it when you do that.
I know.
You need to know that because you're putting yourself in the room saying, I think I can help you. The client needs to know I'm going to get heard. This is going to be a safe place, and this person can help me. They don't need to know your theory.
Yeah.
And for you to spend time. I mean, to me, it's the same conversation as I'm a Christian therapist. Yeah, I work with Christians. I work with Jews. I work with Catholics. I work with Arabs. Doesn't matter. But I don't proselytize my theory of religion or counseling.
And I struggle with that. I struggle with that because I have a belief that language matters, and that if you present the language to the client, that gives them then a basis to start to use language for themselves. They don't have to use the same language that I use, but if they don't have a language, then they need to be able to develop a language to be able to start to think about it. So it's like metacognition, thinking about thinking. You have to be able to have the language to do that, to be able to do that.
I can buy that argument.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I just have, here comes your part stuff, right? Everybody likes to make the
I was waiting on that.
parts, right?
Part of me was waiting on that.
Part of you was.
Yeah.
So a part of me immediately shuts down when we talk about theories. But that's just like my stuff. I think that's my system that really struggled in school to understand the context of I probably had some learning disabilities that went underdiagnosed as a kid or undiagnosed as a kid. And so when we start using the language,
So you don't see yourself as an intellectual.
Well,
And you see this as an intellectual discussion.
I do, and I just shut down, and then I get also oppositional.
but can I ask a question? And if you don't want to answer this, Michelle,
No, you're
then
okay.
don't.
I'm happy
Then, so you're obviously much closer to Brett. I haven't seen you since the last time that I had you in class, and I
There's a lot less wrinkles.
I was trying to figure out when that was. But my recollection of you was as a superior student. And so now I'm hearing you say that you didn't feel that way. And I'm wondering, I mean, was my impression because you put a show on, you know what I'm saying?
Say it, yeah, no, I'll explain why, but that's a fair question.
Yeah.
So I got my first 4.0 when I went to grad school. Like it was like I found my home, but I didn't find, at that stage of the game, I realized how much of an auditory learner I was. So realistically, I was not reading the books with the theories. And what I learned to do was sit and master auditory learning and skills of observation, and was able to retain all the information that way through observation. So when I was like spitballing in class and making observations, it wasn't BS. It was that I wasn't finding who I was as a therapist through textbooks. I was finding it through my experiences with you in class, and you talking about caseload, or the group therapy class. It was like, that was where I learned to be a therapist. When it came to the theories, it was all lost on me.
Gotcha.
In a sense. Like,
so you could see the modeling and internalize the modeling.
Correct.
But you couldn't read the books and internalize the script.
It was very much like a sensory experience.
Yeah.
Like I could hear the model,
Mhm.
experience it, see it play out, but I couldn't read the words. And so there's always a part of me that kind of does shut down when we talk about the
So that's
theorists.
fascinating to me, in part because I've always had the opinion that good therapists have to be acute observers.
Mhm.
And a subset of that is most of them are survivors of one kind of trauma or the other.
Mhm.
Uh, because that chatter or channel
Mhm.
that's going on in all of us all the time as we scan, you have to be able to process and understand
Mhm.
and apply.
Yes.
And those are clinical skills. And what you're saying is you had those when you came to the program, and then you used them to develop your
Yes.
clinical skills.
I believe I mastered them.
And now you're living
I do.
doing it.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
And I think, yeah, very much so. Like it's a little embarrassing because I know it's ready to take my license, but like I don't remember reading a lot.
Nobody listens to this show.
Right. Okay. All right. Then we're safe here.
Not
But
the
like-
license board for sure.
Right. It was such a sensory experience for me. Like, I quit fighting the game of the battle of college. Like, I figured out how I was a good learner,
Mm-hmm.
and it was through like mastering the art of observation and becoming acutely aware of subtle shifts and movements and whatever. And it shows my work.
But I hear you saying that as if it were a deficit, but I hear it as a strength. You
Yes.
figured out where your strong suit was, where your wheelhouse was,
Mhm.
and then you played to that. That just seems
did.
smart to me.
Well, I think, early on when I was early in school, like early in my master's, it felt like a deficit because there were all these like cerebral conversations happening because everybody read the book and I'm sitting there like,
Intellectual masturbation.
exactly what it was. And
Yeah.
so then I remember sitting there being like, feeling embarrassed or self-conscious that like I didn't understand the material, and it just clicked one day and I was like, stop reading the material and
Mhm.
just observe.
Mm-hmm.
Because you'll gather everything you need to know from what
Yes.
Brett tells you. And when,
Mm-hmm.
Mike starts to speak on this, and I feel like I did. I turned it into a real positive. I was really insecure about it at first, and now, I don't know, I think it's kind of one of my great skills.
So then I feel I'm going to ask this question.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a bad reflection on me. I didn't teach you IFS.
No.
I know that.
No, you did not.
So how did you find internal family systems?
From my own therapist,
Mm.
Karen Grayson. So,
Another student of mine.
right? So yeah, she,
We're a very incestuous group.
I was literally about to say that.
Yeah.
I was doing my own work with her, and then she introduced, the worlds collided at the same time. I
Mhm.
was leaving education, and she introduced this to me, and my mind exploded probably because I'm a visual learner and auditory, and when you learn IFS and you learn about parts,
Mhm.
why it's so beautiful for men, because men really struggle, right? We talked about with having these feelings, and they're just these like abstract thoughts that are like floating around and they don't quite know what to do with them.
Mhm.
And when we talk about parts, it takes feelings and it grounds them and it makes them
Gives them a place to be.
it gives them a place to be. It makes them visual, and men like visuals.
Mhm.
And it turns feelings tangible, and it rocked my world.
Mhm.
It absolutely rocked my world. It was struggling. I'm saying that because I wasn't struggling in terms of like being able to identify what my theory was. Like
Mhm.
I can tell you what I pull from and whatnot, but when I found IFS, it was like, when you fall in love and you're like, where have you been all my life?
Yeah.
Like it solidified. I have art in my office from a client that says we are not just one, we are made up of parts. And she drew that for me over 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And then I was introduced to IFS and it gave me the language, and I was like, holy, I've been doing this
Mhm.
entire time, and it just gave me the language,
You
right?
had an epiphany.
I did. Like I am that good. I just now have language for it,
Yeah.
So yeah, I found IFS probably 6-7 years ago, maybe.
Mhm.
It just, why I really love it is that it's not super clinical.
Mhm.
I am not a stuffy, like I'm not a clinical person in therapy, because I don't think my clients really care about the clinical side. They just want to feel better, and they just want to feel like it's constant. Does that make sense? Of course it makes sense.
You help me. You help me get better. You help me feel better.
Yeah. And so IFS did that for me.
Well, I think that there are a lot of people. I've always said there are two ways you can do therapy. You can just alleviate symptomology and feel better, and that is one way you can do it. Or you can dive into a real headlong, seeking cathexis and epiphany and genuine self-understanding. And I think that different people have to do it differently, and that's why there are different therapists. And I don't think that any way is necessarily superior, but I do think that there need to be people who do it different ways, because it's going to reach different people differently.
Absolutely.
I used to say that about teachers.
Yeah.
Not every teacher's good for every student.
Right. And I tell people all the time, I am not for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I am direct. I can be polarizing at times. But a lot of it comes from things we learned in class of like, I'm not going to sit here and waste your time. I cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
So we're gonna move, and typically by the time somebody's found me, they've heard my reputation. But hell yeah, I'm worth it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But people pay a lot of money, and so let's not waste their time.
Right.
But a lot of the directness comes from the yellow stuff of working in the here and now, right?
Right.
So
that's all you really have.
Absolutely, because our office is a petri dish.
Sitting in the room, what do we feel? What do we have? What information? What behaviors? Here and now, are we in touch with? Right. Not there and then, out there somewhere. We can speculate, we can anticipate, we can plan, but all we really have is what's here.
And if you think about what we talked about last time in terms of how do you help, as we were talking specifically about men, but creating that awareness for men is processing in the here and now and sitting across from a man and going, hey, I'm holding my breath right now. That tells me you are.
Yeah.
Why aren't we breathing? Here
That's
and
a
now.
projective identification.
Yeah.
So let's take our break and let's pick this up on the other side.
Okay.
Hey everybody, Dr. Michael Mahan here from Psych with Mike, and I couldn't be more excited to talk to you about Athletic Greens, which is a new sponsor we have here on the show. I started taking Athletic Greens, watching some YouTube videos and doing my own research. I wanted to add something to my daily workout program to give me some energy and to support gut health. And that was the one thing that kept coming up again and again with Athletic Greens, is the guy who started the company did a bunch of research because he was having some gut health issues that he couldn't get any resolution for. He developed Athletic Greens, and it's just exploded from there. So it's 75 superfoods, vitamins, minerals, probiotics, whole food sources that's all in one daily scoop. You put it in 8 or 12 ounces of water, you shake it up, and you drink it. The taste is very, very drinkable. I actually enjoy it, and I have been using it, and my energy levels have just been through the roof. I really like Athletic Greens because of some of the sustainability things that they do. So they buy carbon credits and, to help protect the rainforest, which is something that I really like. But if you order Athletic Greens in your subscription, you're going to also get a year's supply of their vitamin D supplementation and 5 free travel packs. And that vitamin D is so important during those winter months when we're not getting enough sunlight. We've talked about how that decreases your mood and increases depression, and that can be a real deal changer. So you go to athleticgreens.com/emerging. That's athleticgreens.com/EMERGING. That's the Psych with Mike promo, and you're going to get that additional vitamin D support for a year and 5 free travel packs. So take control of your own health today. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.
Okay, we're back. So that here and now focus that comes from Yalom, which is an existential, that Yalom's an existentialist, and is so important for really any kind of therapy. But when you're saying, okay, we're not breathing, why aren't we breathing? And that's a here and now focus, then where does IFS come into that?
So it doesn't.
Okay.
It doesn't. So I mean, it can, but I find myself just oscillating when appropriate
So you're not
Yeah, yeah.
limited by the structure of the therapy.
No.
You are engaged in the process of the conversation.
Correct. So like, so I said, I have a tendency, I have a part of me, right, that shuts down when we talk about theories. So if someone were to label me as an IFS therapist, I'm immediately going to balk at that. Like, we're not labeling that either. That is a very big piece of what I do. But if we're processing in the here and now and saying like, so I'm not breathing, that tells me you're not breathing. Help me understand what's happening here. I can say, if I want to incorporate IFS, I can say, because it happens often, I feel like there has been a shift inside of you, which tells me a part has stepped in. Can you be aware of that? Can you check in with your system and tell me what part just stepped in? Because we were vibing and we were moving. And then I said this, and there was a shift in your energy, which leads me to believe a part, again, it's constant teaching of awareness.
So we mentioned Yalom's books. Yalom is a leading author and theorist in the field of counseling, psychology. I'm enamored with him and his work. One of the things that he talks about is that all of us, and it drives a lot of dysfunctional behavior, especially in men, have an anxiety about death and fear of death. And as we get older or as critical events happen in our lives, the underlying issue the therapist needs to be aware of is this person has fear of dying, or facing their own immortality, whatever that means. And I remember, because I came to you as a therapist, and I remember getting in touch with that because I turned 74, I'd retired, a couple of my friends had died my age, a good friend of mine committed suicide. And I was really struggling with that, but I hadn't put it in focus.
Right.
And I'm sitting in the room with you, and you're inviting me to get in touch with all those feelings, and I just started crying raw grief of loss and fear. And you just very quietly sit there. My wife was clenched onto me, and you were sitting there, and you just softly said, breathe. Just breathe.
Stay here.
And I couldn't. And I mean, my chest was frozen, my throat was frozen, my tears, I mean, like a blubbering child. But in a little while it passed and I could breathe. So what you're describing about that isn't a technical theory. It's not 10 chapters in a book that you can read to learn how to do.
Right.
You have to be able to do it on the if-come.
Yes.
Somebody walks in the room and they get in touch with these emotions. You have to be able to be present
And catch it.
And hold them in a safe holding environment.
Yes.
Whatever it is. When we were talking in the previous episode that we did about rage, same thing. A man who's rageful or angry in this moment and is boiling with it inside, you as the clinician have to be able to sit and say, it's okay, stay with it, feel it. You're not going to hurt yourself, you're not going to punch a wall, you're not going to hurt me, but you can feel these feelings, and then this process I was talking about. But when it's time, right now, just stay with it, here and now.
And my orientation has always been, and you know I say this all the time, that really everything comes down to the ability or lack thereof to emotionally regulate. So when I did my dissertation, I was doing my dissertation on substance abuse as an attachment disorder, which there's very little information on, but I can make an argument for why I believe that. And I got 1/3 of the way through it, and my chairperson, who was not very confrontational, came to me and said, "Oh, you have to start over because all of this, information is 20 years old, and we want something that's more recent." And so I redid it, and I did the biological similarities and differences of depression and anxiety because I knew that I could get very, very current research on that. But the point being that, for me, I've always said no one ever goes to psychotherapy because they have a problem. People go to psychotherapy because a problem that they have has caused them emotional dysregulation. If you can emotionally regulate, you don't need psychotherapy. When you can't emotionally regulate, the smallest problem in the world can cause you to not be able to function. And so for me, it's all about trying to find where is the dysfunction in the emotional regulation. Some people have never been able to emotionally regulate. They don't even know what that means. They don't even, yeah. And so it's all about trying. So to me, it doesn't really matter. Like I have a very clearly defined process or understanding of how I think that emotional regulation develops that I can explain to people at great detail. And nobody cares. Brett tells me all the time, nobody cares. But it doesn't matter to me how people come at that, but that's the goal, is how do I identify where your emotional regulation breakdown is and how do I help you be able to emotionally regulate better? And when you can do that, you don't need me anymore.
How does your theory, though, lead people to the awareness of like needing to towards that emotional regulation? Like how does that show up in your work?
So for me, the emotional regulation comes from, as I said, the Kohutian ideas of mirroring, idealization, and twinship. So you have an external model. When you're born, you don't know how to emotionally regulate. You're just emotion. You have all of the biological components. You have hormones that get released in your body that change your body, and you have emotional responses, but you don't have any self-soothing ability, no emotional regulation. And so you look to the external examples. When the external examples are good, you learn how to emotionally regulate. When they're not good or you don't internalize them efficiently, then there's a breakdown in that. And so then you grow up, and that's where, to me, the insecurity comes from. So for Piaget, what he said is that first stage of development is security versus, trust versus mistrust. That's where security comes from. If you don't have grounded security, it's because in that very, very early model, that wasn't modeled for you. And so the process of psychotherapy is about giving the client an alternative
Like
model.
reparenting.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And so if I can come into that situation consistently enough, and you can do whatever you want.
Clarify, it's not me reparenting you.
Right.
It's me facilitating.
It's me just
your ability
giving
to
the
reparent
example.
yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then you internalize a
Kind of like
different.
a grown-up you talking to the child you.
Yes. Yes.
But the therapist has to be able to provide a consistent model for the client to be able to see that and then internalize that. And I say that therapists loan their clients a little bit of ego until the client builds that for themselves and can carry it around with them.
That's interesting.
So one of the clinical arguments about that is, do you as a clinician encourage codependency of the client on you?
Yeah.
And there is an argument that can be made that initially you need them to be dependent
Right.
on you, but then you need to teach them how to become independent in a healthy way.
Exactly. I mean,
And then when they are, they leave.
but it's reparenting. So I mean, that all goes into it now. But the for me the difference is the motivation of the therapist. It's all about the countertransference. If I am intentionally eliciting the dependence because that I get off on that, then that's wrong. Right.
Yeah.
But if I am being a part of the process of reparenting with no ego invested in it from my side, then it's just a part of the process.
Well, we were talking about that on the way here, like that constant awareness for clinicians to have the power differentials that are in that space at all times. And so I feel like it's my job to be checking in on a regular basis and having the uncomfortable conversations and essentially just modeling boundaries and how to communicate and saying, am I still meeting the needs in which you came here for? is there anything that we are doing that just doesn't feel right for you? Because people will stay because they want to be pleasing and, continue work that's not fulfilling what they need. So I think that's a way to check those power differentials and not create that codependency or the lasting codependency on the relationship.
But even when we are talking about these angry males, and so the angry male comes in and they can rage, and then you can sit with that and not react in a way that is cowering or is submissive, maybe
Or
for the first time.
challenging.
Yeah, maybe for the first time in their experience that's ever happened. That's giving them a different dynamic to play off of. Now I have an alternative way of being able to understand this anger. Now can I allow myself to be vulnerable enough to start to explore that? That's the process of therapy.
Right, absolutely. Looking across from a man who is raging and looking him in the eyes and saying, I'm not afraid of you. And the shame that falls
Would
from
you say that, or would you say I'm not afraid of your anger?
both,
Both.
whatever feels more right
Yeah.
in the moment. But often when you to square a man up and say, I'm not afraid of you,
Right.
can be significant.
Yeah. But I think that's a part of the therapy experience, and not that. So let me just say this. Start differently. Like, it's never occurred to me that I'm afraid in therapy. Like I've always said, if I ever went to work and I was afraid, I would stop doing it.
Yeah.
And so I've never been in a situation where I've been in plenty of situations where men have been rageful. It's never occurred to me that I have to say I'm not afraid of you, because that's not. But I understand how that plays differently with female therapists, and because female therapists are 75 to 80% of the population of therapists, the only way men are going to get therapy, statistically, is a lot of them are going to be in therapy with females. And so I think that what you are talking about is so salient. How is a female going to sit in that and be able to absorb that anger because of what is the counter transference for that female when the man is raging, and how do females learn to be able to. Okay, so let me ask you a question. So do you resist is there something in you that says, oh, this guy's angry, I should be subservient? No, I can't be because I'm doing therapy. Or have you trained yourself not? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think so. Keep going. Finish that.
So do you train yourself to not have that reaction?
I think not having the reaction comes from my childhood, number one, and being around a lot of chaos and knowing how to navigate that. But number two, like we said in the last episode, like when I see that anger and that rage, I see wounding and I feel compassionate. Like I don't know that I've had to train myself to do that as much as it just organically is part of who I am.
I think that, talking about a marital situation or a couple situation where the man is raging, your ability to experience that and reflect back to him, I'm not afraid. I'm aware that you're angry, but I'm sitting with it and I'm not afraid, is modeling for him what that's like in his life. Other people, in particular women, don't react that way.
Correct.
But you're also modeling for the woman who may be seeing this for the first time and may discover that's a thing that she can do going forward. They both have a learning curve for helping survive his rage.
Yes. Well, and I'm even was thinking as we were processing this, that it's one thing for a man to come into therapy with another man and to not have that man experience his rage as intimidating. Yeah, but it's a different thing for him to go to therapy with a woman and not have the woman experience that rage as intimidating. And I think both are beneficial, both are necessary for good therapy. But go ahead.
The flip side of that argument is I've had women say to me, you can't know this.
Yeah.
You can't know this because you're a man.
Yeah.
You can't know what I'm feeling, or you can't know what I'm seeing, and yet they were experiencing that I was knowing.
Yeah.
And it really rattled. I mean, it
I bet.
doesn't matter which
Yeah.
sex. If your worldview is people respond to this behavior, this emanation from me a particular way, and you encounter somebody that doesn't do that, it's like, well, what the hell's going on here?
Well, right.
Now I don't know what to do.
Right. You changed the script on me.
Yeah, exactly. Which is what you're trying to do.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah.
So hopefully that was beneficial for people. I think that was another really excellent clinical discussion, and I know that that is the aim for Mr. Brett Newcomb. So
Always.
I hope that he is just delighted.
Oh, I'm just happy as a tick in the woods.
As always, I'm not going to go. As always, the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. We would love it if you would find us on the interwebs and on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a comment and a rating, but most importantly, if you would go to the YouTubes and find Psych with Mike and subscribe to the show, that would be fantastic. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych.